That's very fun. Time to get more serious. I am up here with my friend Kazumi. As you can see from our key stats that we have absolutely nothing in common. Except there is one thing. A few times a week we get together in a padded room with some other friends. We put on expensive pajamas and then we slap hands, bump fists, and simulate murder. That's right. We are both longtime students of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is a submission grappling martial art. It is also a hard form of exercise. It's self-defense. It is a competition sport on its own, as well as in mixed martial arts. It's also used to train police and the military. In a match, what you do is you take down your opponent and control them and force them to submit before they break a limb or get choked unconscious. Now, I'm making that sound violent, and it kind of is, but what you'll find if you visit a jiu-jitsu academy are students young and old, large and small, beginners and experts who all like to train together. And so the irony at the core of most martial arts is that you're practicing for a life and death scenario, but you're also protecting each other from real harm. And so when you've been doing this for a while, it kind of becomes a habit, like you end up training when you travel. This is a standard kind of schedule if you've done that before. And I visited different academies and I competed at different tournaments where I found myself doing this weird ritual with total strangers who I'd never seen before and might never see again. And at first I didn't think about it that much, but then I thought about it a lot. I thought about how when I was a kid, I was taught to fear strangers. I was told that strangers would rob me or kidnap me or murder me, yet as an adult, I found myself trusting them with my literal life and limbs. And what I found is that that trust comes from a strong social contract. There's intrinsic and extrinsic rules of the game that come together to make that trust happen. So in a professional jiu-jitsu match, you have a ref that's there to enforce the extrinsic rules of the game, like no eye gouging. If you eye gouge, you're disqualified, not allowed. But it's your teammates and the crowd that enforce the kind of intrinsic, unwritten rules of how to behave. So if you do a good match and you compete well, everybody claps and cheers and they get very excited. But if you gloat about your victory or you get pissy about a defeat, we clap a little less and we kind of like cough and like look at you politely and kind of make a face. And that kind of definitive but discreet messaging tells you how to behave both in competition and in training, right? And so it's that behavior more than the actual written rules that allows us to compete without hurting each other. So this is kind of a fun little example of how you can have grown adults who can play fight in their pajamas without actually getting hurt, and that's super fun and interesting. But what I find this more interesting is when you see the same dynamic play out at a larger scale, right? So if you drove here, you probably stopped at red lights. Most people do. It's a written law. But we all know there's behavior in public that, or in traffic, I should say, that if you do it wrong, you'll get feedback from everybody else that you've done it wrong, right? And so at the national level, we have social contracts, big ones like the Constitution and the rule of law. And at the international level, we have trade agreements and the UN and universal human rights. It scales all the way up and down. My friend Sarah is one of these world traveling jiu-jitsu people. Recently she's trained in Spain and in Russia and in Xinjiang, which is a western province of modern China, where there's a large scale example of this dynamic happening kind of right now. There are hundreds of thousands of people from a minority population who are being detained with weak or no charges and held in political re-education camps, and it's been described as a black hole that people go into and no one comes out. In recent decades, this type of targeted mass containment could be hidden from citizens of the same country and almost invisible to people of the global community. But recent information infrastructure is shrinking the world. And so how we react and respond to the behaviors we either condemn or condone sends clear messages to those involved about how to behave next. I've been talking really fast. But the point is, when Sarah was in Xinjiang, she found other jiu-jitsu students she could train with. There, like anywhere else in the world, she found people who knew how to train hard, but also knew how to protect each other from harm. Now, for me and for us back over here, it's really easy to dehumanize and generalize and just kind of forget about conflict that's happening so far away. But when I'm in contact with another individual on the mat, I remember that they are very human and very fragile and very real. And so it's my secret hope, which is a little less secret now tonight here, but that as the world shrinks, we'll be able to call out bad behavior and influence the individuals involved. I must have missed my last slide, unless that was it. but more people should be able to practice combat with strangers, and fewer should have to live and engage with enemies that they fear. Thank you.